All right, let's dive into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Ooh, controversial title.
Yeah, but, before anyone thinks this is like, just be a jerk,
Right, yeah.
It's not that at all. We're actually going to dig into this concept of choosing your struggles, which I think is super interesting. So the book, Manson style, it's very, like, conversational.
Yeah, very much so.
And sometimes a little, how should we say, colorful with the language.
Definitely.
But underneath it all, he's asking these really big questions about life,
Yeah.
and how to live it well. And he starts off with this really blunt idea, we all die.
Yeah.
So we've got a limited number of ficks to give.
Right, it's finite.
But it's not about being apathetic.
No, not at all. It's more about, like, being really intentional.
Intentional, about where you choose to invest your energy. Right.
Yeah. Because, we can't care deeply about everything.
Right.
It's just not possible.
So, for everyone listening, think about it. What are you spending your energy on right now?
Like right this second.
Yeah.
Is it the right stuff?
Does it actually matter to you?
Mm-hmm. And this idea of choosing your battles, it's not brand new.
No, actually, Manson's kind of tapping into, like, ancient wisdom here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Stoicism, for example.
Okay.
The philosophy. It's all about virtue, reason, and accepting what you can't control.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And Manson makes it, relevant to today's world, which is, I think, what's cool about his writing.
Totally.
So one thing I really love about the book is how funny he is.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor.
Like this whole thing with the disappointment panda.
Oh, yeah, hilarious.
It's like, what is this character all about?
So disappointment panda, he's like this, like a superhero, but his superpower.
Yeah.
Delivering the hard truths.
Oh, I see.
The stuff people need to hear but don't want to.
Okay.
Like, working like crazy to get rich.
Yeah.
Won't magically fix your crappy relationship with your kids. Oof.
Right.
So disappointment pandas, like the dose of reality.
Exactly.
Maybe a little brutal, but with a funny twist.
Helps it go down.
But those hard truths, they can help us, right?
Well, for sure. They kind of force you to, like, check your expectations.
Right.
See if they actually line up with reality.
Yeah, because you can't just wish your problems away.
Nope.
And actually, Manson makes this point that happiness, it doesn't come from avoiding problems.
Wait, really?
It comes from solving them.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, he kind of flips the script on, the whole happiness is the absence of problems thing.
Makes sense, though.
Like, problems are always going to be there.
Yeah.
It's part of life. But it's how you engage with them
Uh-huh.
that matters. He uses this great example about getting a gym membership.
Okay.
So you solve one problem, like being out of shape.
Yeah.
But then you create new ones. Finding time to go, actually working out, the soreness.
Totally. So much easier to just, like, stay on the couch.
Yeah. Right. But avoiding the whole thing,
Uh-huh.
in the long run, that doesn't really get you anywhere.
Leads to stagnation.
Yeah. So instead of asking, how can I avoid problems?
You should be asking.
Yeah, like, are the problems I'm choosing to solve, are they the right ones?
Right, like, are they actually moving you closer to what you want?
Exactly. Okay, so then he introduces this guy named Jimmy,
Jimmy.
who perfectly embodies what Manson calls the not special trap.
Okay, lay it on me. Who's Jimmy?
So Jimmy's this guy, always talking about his amazing business ideas,
Uh-huh. Classic.
but he never actually does anything.
Oh, I know Jimmy.
All talk, no action.
Yeah.
And it's like he believes he's exceptional.
Without actually, like, doing anything exceptional.
Right. And Manson's saying this is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because we're bombarded with this message of be extraordinary.
Yeah, you're special, you're unique.
Yeah, but the reality is most of us.
We're pretty average.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Yeah. But I think that message can really mess people up
Oh, absolutely.
because you feel entitled to success.
Yeah, like you deserve it without actually putting in the work.
Right. And then when you inevitably face setbacks.
You blame everyone else.
Exactly. Instead of, taking responsibility. So it's like the opposite of having a growth mindset.
Oh, totally. Instead of embracing challenges,
Yeah.
you're, terrified of failure.
Because any failure, it's like a threat to your ego.
Totally.
Oh.
And that's where self-awareness comes in.
Okay.
Being honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
And being willing to put in the work.
It's like admitting you have a problem.
Exactly. Let go of the need to be exceptional
Yeah.
and focus on becoming your best self.
Love that. Now, Manson, he doesn't just, like, talk about these concepts in the abstract.
No.
He uses a lot of personal stories, which I think is really effective.
Yeah, it makes it relatable.
Like, for example, the story about getting busted for weed in middle school.
Oh, yeah, with the hidden compartment in his backpack.
Yeah, I mean, he was resourceful.
He was, wasn't he?
But there's a deeper point he's making with that story.
Oh, absolutely.
He talks about how that experience, like, fueled his sense of entitlement.
Interesting.
Especially in his later relationships.
I could see that, like trying to overcompensate for feeling inadequate.
Yeah, exactly. And it led to unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, and blaming others when things didn't go his way.
Right. So, even a seemingly funny anecdote, it can reveal something deeper about, how our past shapes our present.
For sure.
Yeah.
Highlights the importance of self-reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about, like, choosing your struggles, the dangers of entitlement.
Yeah.
Now, Manson takes this idea further by comparing two musicians.
Okay, this should be good.
Dave Mustaine from Megadeth.
Right?
And Pete Best, the original drummer for the Beatles.
Interesting comparison.
Both of them, they experienced major setbacks. Mustaine, he got kicked out of Metallica, like, right before they hit it big.
Ouch. Talk about bad timing.
And Best, he got replaced by Ringo Starr.
Right before Beatlemania.
Right. So both of them, they face these huge failures.
Huge.
But their responses, they were completely different.
Oh, I bet.
So Mustaine, he formed Megadeth.
Yeah.
He became successful.
Mm.
But he stayed super bitter towards Metallica.
Like holding a grudge.
Totally. Like, his whole definition of success was based on proving them wrong.
Seeking external validation.
Exactly. And that can be like a never-ending cycle.
Oh, sure. Because you're always chasing something outside of yourself.
Yeah. But Pete Best, he seemed to take a totally different approach.
Okay.
He continued to play music.
Good for him.
He focused on family. And it seems like he genuinely let go of the bitterness.
Wow.
And Manson uses this to illustrate, the power of choosing your values.
Yeah, because Mustaine's values, they were all external, all about comparison.
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for misery.
It is. Whereas Best, it seems like he found contentment on his own terms.
By defining what mattered to him.
Yeah. So Manson, he actually lays out specific criteria for what he considers good versus bad values.
This I gotta hear.
He says good values are reality-based.
Okay.
They're socially constructive.
Makes sense.
Immediate and controllable.
Got it.
Whereas bad values, they tend to be the opposite.
Okay.
So, like, superficial, destructive, delayed, and uncontrollable.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so a good value might be honesty.
Honesty, okay.
It's grounded in reality.
Right.
It helps you build good relationships.
Right.
It's something you can practice right now.
You can control it.
Exactly. But then, like, a bad value could be popularity.
Popularity, okay.
Because it's often based on, like, superficial stuff.
Yeah.
It can lead to unhealthy competition.
Totally.
And it's ultimately out of your control.
Because it depends on other people.
Yeah. So, for everyone listening,
think about it.
What are you chasing?
Yeah.
Is it something that's truly meaningful?
Or are you stuck on something superficial?
That's a good question to ask yourself.
I think that's a good place to pause for now.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We did.
Choosing your struggles, entitlement, defining your values.
Lightning stuff.
But there's more to come.
Oh, yeah. In the next part, we'll delve into Manson's thoughts on responsibility, boundaries, and even the nature of belief.
Stay tuned for that.
It's going to be good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a fick. Last time, we got into Manson's ideas about choosing our struggles and those tricky values. Now he goes deeper into, well, responsibility.
Yeah, and he has an interesting way of looking at it.
Okay, how so?
Well, he makes a distinction between responsibility and fault.
That's a good point, because we often use those terms, like, interchangeably.
Right. But Manson's saying they're not the same thing.
So what's the difference?
He says fault is all about the past, you know. Who messed up, who's to blame. But responsibility, that's about the present moment.
So, like, owning your choices.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging you have the power to act no matter what happened before.
So it's not about dwelling on who's to blame.
Right. It's about, like, okay, what can I do now to make things better?
I like that. It's empowering.
It is. And Manson uses this really good example.
Okay, hit me.
Imagine you find a baby on your doorstep.
Okay, pretty random.
Yeah, but stick with me. Obviously, it's not your fault the baby's there,
Right.
but you're now responsible for what happens to that baby.
That's a heavy responsibility.
Exactly. And that's Manson's point. Responsibility isn't about blame. It's about, like, stepping up in the situation you're in.
Okay, so taking ownership.
Right. And he even plays with that famous Spider-Man line.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, but he flips it. With great responsibility comes great power.
I love that. It changes the whole perspective.
It does, doesn't it? And this idea of responsibility, it goes beyond actions.
Okay, so what else does it apply to?
Our emotions, our feelings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you can't control how other people make you feel.
That's for sure.
But you are responsible for how you react to those feelings.
And how you move on from them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even if someone wrongs you,
Yeah.
you have a choice.
To either stay stuck in bitterness or to forgive and grow.
Right. Easier said than done, though.
Definitely takes some serious self-awareness.
It does. And
Yeah.
courage to let go of that blame.
Which is why Manson shares that personal story about getting cheated on.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
He initially did what I think a lot of us would do.
Blame the other person.
Yeah, he was angry, hurt.
Of course.
But by holding on to that blame,
Yeah.
he was actually making himself more miserable.
It's like that blame keeps you trapped.
Totally. It was preventing him from healing and moving on.
But then he had this realization.
Okay, what was it?
He realized he was responsible for his own happiness.
No matter what his ex had done.
Yeah. He couldn't control her actions, but he could control his response.
So he shifted his focus.
From blame to self-improvement.
Wow. That must have been tough.
Yeah, to go from pointing the finger to looking inward.
But that's where the real growth is.
Being honest with yourself and owning your choices.
Absolutely. Even the painful ones.
Right. And that leads back to Manson's main message.
Okay.
Choosing your struggles, it's not just about, like, goals and achievements. It's about choosing how you respond to challenges.
To those curveballs life throws at you.
Yeah, and how you deal with your emotions.
And ultimately, how you define your own happiness.
Okay, so boundaries, another key theme for Manson. He uses Romeo and Juliet as an example.
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, but he's not saying we should all run off and have tragic romances.
Right, that wouldn't end well.
It's more about how we sometimes romanticize that intensity.
Like that whole can't live without you thing.
Yeah, that can be a sign of unhealthy boundaries.
Definitely.
And we see it all the time in movies, you know.
The idea that true love means sacrificing everything.
But in real life, healthy love needs boundaries.
Right, respecting each other's individuality.
Having space to grow.
Being okay with saying no sometimes.
Yeah, because otherwise you fall into these roles.
Like the victim and the savior.
Exactly. One person constantly needs rescuing.
And the other feels obligated to fix everything.
Which isn't sustainable. It's like codependency.
It is.
And Manson's saying both those roles, they stem from a lack of self-awareness.
And a fear of responsibility.
Yeah, because instead of facing our own stuff, we try to control others.
And that never ends well.
It doesn't. So how do we break out of these unhealthy patterns?
Well, Manson stresses setting those clear boundaries.
Okay, that makes sense. And being able to communicate your needs.
Yes. It's about saying no without guilt.
And recognizing you're not responsible for other people's feelings.
You can be supportive, but you can't fix them.
He uses this great analogy, a sinking ship.
A sinking ship.
Yeah, you can throw someone a life preserver,
Okay.
but you can't jump in and try to save them yourself.
Or you'll both drown.
Exactly. It's about knowing your limits.
I like that.
Okay, now for a real mind bender. Manson gets into beliefs.
Oh, this should be good.
He argues that our brains, they actually seek out information that confirms what we already believe.
Even if those beliefs are wrong.
Yeah.
Interesting. Why would our brains do that?
He calls them meaning machines. They're always trying to make sense of the world.
Okay.
And they do that by creating stories that fit our assumptions.
So we're kind of biased towards our own perspectives.
Exactly. And those stories aren't always accurate.
Yeah.
He uses the example of the telephone game.
Okay, I see where you're going with this, how the message gets distorted.
Yeah, we misremember things, fill in the gaps, and the story changes.
So what we think is true
Might not be the whole picture.
could be completely off.
He shares this story about Meredith Moran.
Who's that?
She's a writer, a feminist, and she ended up creating a false memory.
A false memory, wow. About what?
Being abused by her father.
That's heavy.
It is, but it wasn't intentional lying.
So how did it happen?
Her brain was trying to make sense of things.
Oh.
She was doing research on child abuse.
Right.
She had a difficult relationship with her dad.
So her mind connected those dots.
And created a memory to explain her feelings.
That's wild and kind of scary if you think about it. If our brains can do that.
Yeah, it makes you question everything.
It does. And Manson doesn't have all the answers.
Of course not.
But he says, question your beliefs.
Especially the ones that cause you pain.
Be open to the possibility you might be wrong.
Because that's how we grow.
It is.
So what beliefs are you holding on to that might be holding you back? That's a question for our listeners.
It is. And on a more practical level, Manson offers advice on procrastination.
Okay, I struggle with that. Lay it on me.
It's his do something principle.
Do something, as in just do anything.
Pretty much. The idea is action often comes before motivation.
So don't wait for inspiration.
Nope. Just start doing something, even if it's small.
Okay, so instead of overthinking, just take that first step.
Exactly. Manson talks about starting his business.
Yeah.
He was overwhelmed with anxiety.
I can relate.
But then he remembered advice from his math teacher.
Okay.
If you're stuck, don't just sit there. Start working on it.
Simple but powerful.
It is. It breaks that cycle of inaction.
Because then the action itself can create motivation.
He compares it to a snowball rolling down a hill.
Oh, I like that.
Starts small, but gains momentum.
So when doing something becomes your metric.
Even failure becomes progress.
Interesting. Because you learn from your mistakes.
You adjust, you keep moving forward.
Okay, so Manson, he also doesn't shy away from big existential questions.
Uh-huh.
Like in that chapter where he describes facing his mortality.
At the Cape of Good Hope?
Yeah, he takes you right there with him to that cliff edge.
Oh, I remember that part. The wind, the feeling of emptiness.
Yeah, it's visceral. And he uses that experience to explore this concept of death terror.
Death terror.
The idea that our fear of death drives so much of our behavior.
We try to leave our mark on the world.
Build monuments, chase fame, all to kind of cheat death.
Trying to create a legacy.
Exactly.
And Manson's saying, by facing death head on,
Yeah.
you can actually choose your values more freely.
Because you're not running from that fear.
Right. You acknowledge that your time is limited.
So you focus on what truly matters.
Yeah. He even says, the more I peer into the darkness,
Yeah.
the brighter life gets.
That's powerful. Like embracing the darkness makes the light more vivid.
It's like staring into the abyss and realizing there's nothing to be afraid of.
Okay, so for our listeners, knowing that our time is finite, what are you going to give a feck about today? What values will you choose?
It's a question worth pondering.
Back again for the final part of our deep dive into Mark Manson. We've talked about choosing struggles, responsibility, all that good stuff. What are your big takeaways?
It's been a ride, that's for sure. Manson, he really doesn't hold back, does he?
No, not at all. But I appreciate that honesty, you know?
Yeah, it's refreshing. And I think deep down, he really wants to help people.
I think so too. One thing that hit me was like his take on happiness.
Yeah.
We're so obsessed with like instant gratification these days.
Always chasing that next hit of pleasure.
Right. But Manson's saying true happiness, it's not that.
It's deeper.
Yeah. It's about embracing the struggles, the ups and downs.
Finding meaning in those experiences.
So it's not like this destination you arrive at.
More like a journey, a process.
Yeah. It's about finding that inner peace, that contentment.
That doesn't depend on what's happening around you.
Exactly. Which is tough, right? Because we're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should have, what we should be.
It's hard to tune that out.
It is.
Yeah.
But Manson's saying you got to step back and define your own values.
Figure out what truly resonates with you.
And that takes self-awareness.
Knowing yourself, your motivations, your weak spots.
Yeah, and that's a constant process, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're always learning, growing, evolving.
It takes honesty.
Yeah, being willing to look at yourself, even the parts you don't like.
And to take responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your thoughts, your emotions.
He's not saying blame yourself, though.
Right. It's more about recognizing you have agency.
That you have the power to choose how you respond to things.
To shape your own reality, basically.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful if you think about it.
It is. So, to wrap up our deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Life is all about choices, you know. What we focus on, what we value, how we react to things. Manson's book, it's like a roadmap for making those choices more consciously, more intentionally.
So it's not about not caring at all. It's about caring about the right things.
Letting go of the stuff that doesn't matter.
Embracing the messiness of life.
Finding your own path.
And living it authentically. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.